How's it going? And welcome to the Wrenching Lounge. So today is maintenance day. The truck has about 145,000 miles on it, and it's time to give it some love. So today's the day I'm doing two of the messiest maintenance jobs you can do. Alright, so what are the two messiest jobs that you should be doing to your truck? Transmission fluid change and a diff oil change. My wife thinks I'm absolutely nuts. It's over 100 degrees in my garage. Comment below the hottest you've ever worked in your garage. And I'll see you at the Wrenching Lounge. So we're going to start off with the transmission. That involves dropping the transmission pan, changing the filter, putting it all back together, and finally, probably the toughest part, checking the fluid level. Why is it the toughest? Because you're guaranteed to get second and third degree burns from the catalytic converter. Why Ford did this, I have no idea. So here's the things that we're going to be using. To start off with, we have the Motorcraft Lv transmission fluid. Highly recommend that over any others, just to be on the safe side. I got 6 quarts. That should be enough, but we're going to find out. Of course, we have the Motorcraft transmission filter. And then finally, I'm changing it up because currently the transmission does not have a drain plug. So we went with a Dorman transmission pan where it comes with a drain plug for future changes. So pretty basic on that. And now for the diff items. For the diff, we have 3 quarts of Valvoline 75W140. Along with it, one of the surprises in this video was when I was researching, I found out I have a limited slip. And with a limited slip, you have to add 4 ounces of this XL-3 friction modifier to the diff to help condition the clutch packs in the diff. And finally, black RTV to seal up the diff and put the cover back on. If you take anything away from this video, this is the #1 thing. Before draining any fluid in a vehicle, the very first thing you want to do is make sure you can open up the fill plug. So many times I've just dived right in, started draining the fluid, and then in the end, you cannot get the fill plug open, but it's definitely good practice to have. We're underneath here. This is the pan we're taking off. This is what's going to burn you. This gets to like 2,000 degrees. That's the catalytic converter. And Ford puts the fill plug and the dipstick for the transmission pan right next to it. So, 19 millimeter, we're gonna crack this open. Hot. And now we know we're going to be able to fill it after the fact. You might notice all the oil underneath the truck. That's the valve covers. And at the moment, they're on back order. As soon as they get off and I get my order in, we're going to be changing the valve covers in the future. Stay tuned for another video. So, I'm underneath the truck. And I hope you can hear me, but the temperature is now 102 in here, and I gotta keep this fan on. So I apologize if it's a little noisy. So in a previous video, I had some people thinking I was doing some YouTube magic. Because when I dropped the transmission pan in my Chrysler 300, I didn't have any fluid falling out. Well, here's how. All you gotta do, stick a hose down into the fill without burning yourself, and then I just use one of these cheap brake bleeders and suck as much fluid out as I can. But if you want to be a wild man and just go for it, you got to get one of these. Super cheap. This is only $9 at any hardware store. You want to know what it is? It's made for mixing concrete or mortar. You want to see something crazy? Check this out. That bolt was loose. That's loose. That's loose. All of these things are super loose. Granted, the torque isn't very high on them. That's just ridiculous. I can't believe I didn't lose these bolts. At this point, that's the front of the vehicle. What we're going to do is we're going to remove all of the bolts along the back of the oil pan, leaving this one and this one on each side. So the corner bolt and then one on the long side. After we get all the other bolts loose, we're going to loosen these, let the pan fall this way, and if there's any fluid left in it, it's going to drain out. Woo-wee! Transmission pan is out. Time for a break. Temperature check. We're back down to 100.6. Was 102.3 a little while ago. Transmission pan's out. Now, we're only going to be using two things from all the stuff we just took out. And that is the magnet and the gasket. Ford claims the gasket's reusable. All you have to do is just wipe it down really good. I would suggest not using any solvents, just in case. Speaking of the magnet, mine doesn't look too bad. There's a little bit of sludge on it, but that's normal. That's just normal wear and tear from the clutch packs. So overall, looking at my fluid, it's not bad at all. A little on the dark side, but still a good red. So here's something crazy. So Ford says, supposedly, you should not have to change the transmission fluid for the lifetime of the vehicle. But on the same breath, they also say you should change it at 150,000 miles if you tow a lot. Me personally, for what I do for a living, preventative maintenance is everything. If Ford is telling me to do it at 150,000 miles for heavy duty towing and things like that, I'm going to do it no matter what at 150,000 miles. I am drenched in sweat, but we got to keep moving. We have our new setup all ready to go. We got our gasket on nice and clean. We got our magnet back there. And we got our filter ready. One thing to keep in mind, make sure when you take your old filter out, this comes out with it, or make sure you take it out. Alrighty, now it's time to go back underneath the truck and clean off the mating surface for the transmission pan. And we should be good to go. We have our pan and filter ready. We're just going to make sure this outside perimeter is clean. We're going to clean this hole where the filter goes up in so that it'll stick just like that. Transmission pan. Make sure that filter is still in place. At this point, we want to get a couple bolts started. One on this side, one on this side. And there we go. We're just going to start getting all of our bolts started by hand so we don't cross thread anything. Alright, so we got all of them hand tight. And so far I've gone halfway around and we're torquing them to 80 foot-pounds. So I'm assuming whoever did this before, if it was ever done, got confused and skipped a few, was in a hurry or something, and that's why I ended up with a bunch of these loose bolts. So what I like to do is, after I've gone through and done the star pattern, I'll just go all the way around in a circle, just making sure that I've taking care of every single bolt. And there's no chance of me skipping one and ending up with loose bolts. At this point, I'm going to get the exhaust all cleaned up with some brake cleaner. Make sure the drain plug is tight, and we're ready to fill this back up. Alright, so we got everything buttoned up, cleaned up. Now all that's left is to add the fluid. So I sucked out about, we'll say 4.5 quarts. And then you saw what was left in it, still quite a bit. So I'm expecting to use all 6 quarts that I have, but we'll have to see. Now, the question is, how do we get it in the transmission? Here's what we're going to try. First thing we're going to try is this right here. Screws on into it, tube goes toward the bottom, and you pump it. If that doesn't work too well, next option is this guy right here. But we'll see if the first option works. So, temperature check. We're down to 97.5. I think it's time for some more water, and then we'll get to filling up the transmission. Now it's time to see if this pump works. Take it out, stick it in there. And we're going to keep pumping till it comes out of here a little bit. So what's going to happen is, once we fill it up that high, we'll run the vehicle. That'll circulate some of the fluid through the cooler, the converter, and suck it down a little bit. But ideally, the trick is, according to the manufacturer, you need to get the transmission all the way up to operating temperature, which would be 195 to 205. But if you notice on this, there's 2 different hash marks. There's hash marks here, then there's dots there, A and B. So if you fill it up cold to A, the top of A, once it gets up to temperature, this fluid is going to expand. Therefore, the level should be up to the top of B. We're going to test to see if that actually works, but right now the goal is we're going to fill it up to where it overflows. We're going to run it, and then since it's going to be cold, we're going to check the level, and we're going to fill it to where it just reaches the top of the hash marks in the A field. And then after that, and get it up to operating temperature, and check it one more time to see if it's at the top of B. I'll take it. Might take a little while. And I think once it's running, I can get this loop facing this way, away from the catalytic converter, so it doesn't burn. I'm guessing about 4.5 to 5 quarts in it right now. And then we'll top it off with that 6th quart I have. I've now filled it up to the point where it's actually coming out. It's taken all 6 quarts that I had. I'm hoping that's enough. So how we're going to check is, we're going to start at the truck. We're going to run it through each gear, holding it about 5 seconds in each gear. Then we're going to hurry up underneath and try not to burn ourselves and see if, hopefully, it's at the top of the A zone, which is the hash marks. If that's the case, we're good. Let's go. Alright, so here we are. That's getting hot. Truck's running. Let's check it. Not even near it. That's not gonna work. Time to go get more fluid. We're on day 2 now. It was too late last night and I couldn't find any place open that had any more of the fluid I needed. So went out this morning and got some more fluid here. So I wanted to stress, one of the most important things is checking the level of the fluid in the transmission. And I've watched quite a few YouTube videos where they tell you incorrectly. Some of them tell you to fill it up until it flows out of the hole and then you're good. That's wrong. As you can see, I put 6 quarts in. It flowed out and we were still low when the engine was running. So the 2 zones on the dipstick are, the first zone is a cold, but you still have to run the engine when checking the fluid. I'm going to put another quart in. We're going to run the engine. We're going to check the level and make sure it's at the top of the first level, first zone. That's the cool zone. But honestly, if you have any questions, check the service manual. That will tell you how to do it. And the correct way to check the fluid in these 6R80 transmissions is to get the transmission all the way up to operating temperatures, which is 195 to 205 degrees. Once it's at that point, again, you leave the engine running and then check the fluid while the engine's running. You should be in the second zone. That is the hot zone. So for now, I'm going to add some more fluid and we're going to check the cold zone and see if it's at that level. Then we're going to drive it around, get it up to temperature, check the hot zone. After that, we're going to get into changing the fluid in the diff. So stay tuned. Can you see that? Clean it off, test it one more time. Now, ultimately, we're going to need to go drive the truck around, get the temps up to 195, then we're going to do this again and test it. But now we're at almost at the top of the cold zone. So that's good. Let's get the truck up to temperature, then we'll check it again. See, we just checked the level of the cold, and the transmission is only at 113 degrees. So let's get it up to temp. We've now got the transmission temperature up to 197, within range of checking it properly. Remember, this is transmission temperature and not engine temperature. And in case you're wondering, garage temperature check, 99.1. This is where you got to be extremely careful. This thing's measuring anywhere from 900 to over 1500 degrees. So just stay away from it, but it's definitely really hot underneath here. And if you notice, now we were right in the hash. Right in the B mark. Test it again. Right there. Perfect. All right, so we've gotten the perfect measurement. We're gonna store the dipstick back in here. Lower it down. $19mm. Snug it up, and we're good. The fluid change on the transmission is a success. Pretty easy, just messy. And of course, the hardest part is probably checking the fluid and getting it at the right level because there's so much misinformation out there. With the new oil pan, it's got a drain plug now. So what I plan on doing is probably in the next 10,000 miles, I can undo that little drain plug, empty out all the fluid that's in there, and then refill it. Because right now, the full capacity of the transmission is about 13 quarts. And overall, I assume I put in about 7 quarts. So that still leaves quite a bit left in there that we didn't change out. That'll all circulate. We'll drop it. We'll add another 7 quarts. Then we should be good with some really nice clean fluid throughout the whole transmission. But for now, I'm going to pull the truck out, clean up from this mess, turn it around, back it in. Now we're going to do the diff. But first, garage temperature check. With the truck in here running, temperatures got up to about 104, I believe. Right now we're sitting at 102. So just to recap, the transmission is shifting amazing. As you know, a lot of people do it wrong. You gotta have the transmission fluid up to operating temperatures 195 to 205 degrees to be able to check the correct level. I've got it dialed in. It's shifting amazing. Upshifts, downshift, everything is smooth. No complaints whatsoever. We're off to the differential. The differential is super easy. All you gotta do is loosen the pan, let the fluid drain, clean it up a little bit, and fill it with fluid again. Checking the level on this is a whole lot easier, and I'm gonna show you how. We're under the truck. If you remember, what is the most important thing to do before draining any fluid in your vehicle? Check to make sure you can open up the fill plug. If you have trouble getting this undone and you drain all the fluid, now you're in trouble because you can't get it filled. So we're going to check this. Should just be a 3/8 ratchet, and just like that, no issues whatsoever. Now that that step is done, we can drain the fluid. So as you know, on the rear differential of an F-150, there is no drain plug. So how do we get the fluid out? All we have to do is remove this pan. That's holding back the fluid. It's all going to drain out the bottom here into a catch can. And then from there, we clean up the mating surfaces, reapply RTV, seal it up again, and fill it. So for now, let's get these bolts off and get this drained. All right, something to make note of. A couple of the bolts have a stud on top of it. This is where that harness connected up to it. Take note on where those are located before removing all of them, so you know where to put them back. If you notice, I've got all the bolts undone, but it's sealed up pretty well because nothing's leaking out. So what we're going to do is pry off this pan a little bit to get that fluid going. Once we break it open initially, it's pretty easy. And we'll just let that drain for a little bit. Now, at this point, all that's left is a little bit of cleanup. We need to clean the mating surface of the rear differential and the pan. I would highly suggest eye protection. You're going to be spraying some brake cleaner in this area, and you really don't want that coming back and landing in your eye. It burns. Trust me on that one. We're going to be pulling off some of this material. Tell you what, you gotta love the smell of gear oil. Alright, so we're going to take a few paper towels, just kind of cover up this area. You don't want RTV getting into the gears. Probably won't do anything, but better safe than sorry. We take a little scraper and we're just going to clean up. Alright, as you can see, I've got it all cleaned up. Metal's all nice and smooth. One of the important things to remember when you're doing this is, when you're resealing the pan, all of this has to be completely oil-free for you to get a good seal with the RTV. So now all we have to do is move on to the pan and get that cleaned up the same way we did this one. So far we've got everything clean. We've washed everything down with brake cleaner. We're oil-free. Now it's time to get the pan ready to get reinstalled. So for this, we're going to be using some ultra black RTV. It's oil resistant. This is recommended from Permatex for differentials and oil pans. So the trick to this is we're going to be applying a single solid bead about 1/8 inch in diameter along the whole perimeter. According to the service manual, you should be going on the inside of the bolt, not all the way around it. So that's what I'm going to do. After that, we're going to be on the clock. We have about 10 minutes to get this seated up against the differential carrier. Now, according to Permatex, the instructions are, we're going to get it up there, we're going to finger tight all of the bolts all the way around, and then we're going to leave it that way for about an hour. After an hour, then you're going to torque all of them to spec, which is going to be 33 foot-pounds. That should about cover it. Time to put it in. The trick here is not to have the pan touch anything until you're ready to mate it. So what I'm going to do is work on getting one bolt started. Just like that. Get another bolt, and then over here we should be good to go. Per the instructions, we're going to get all the bolts in and then tighten them finger tight. Clock starts, we're going to wait an hour and then torque it to spec, 33 foot-pounds. While we're waiting for this, let's go over what fluid we're going to be using. Alright, so starting this project, I found out something really interesting. I assumed I had an open diff. So with an open diff on a Ford F-150, all you need is some gear oil. Typical rating is 75W140. But I found out I had a limited slip, and that requires one more item. But first, let me show you how I found out I had a limited slip. If you go to your door, right here on the door, it says axle, H9. Come to find out, that H9 means I have 3.55 gear ratio and limited slip. Here's another spot that'll tell you if you have limited slip or not. So right here where we're doing the diff, on the axle, it actually tells you right here, these numbers represent a code, and that code lets you know that I have limited slip. And if you have any questions about that, it's all in the service manual. It tells you everything you need to know. But what does that mean? So that means since I have a limited slip, I have clutches in there. And those clutches require a special fluid called friction modifier. And here it is. Motorcraft makes this additive friction modifier for limited slip rear differentials. It conditions the clutches and allows them to work better. Now yes, the gear oil I have does have limited slip additives, but from what I've seen and what people have said, they still recommend adding a bottle of this. 4 ounces is all you need for your differential. So you put this whole bottle in and then start putting in your gear oil. Total, we would use about 2.8 quarts. So that should be all of what we need. So the clock has started. I have about 45 minutes left before I torque down the housing bolts to 33 foot-pounds. Then we can start adding our fluid, and that's it. Overall, pretty easy. Time-wise, doesn't take a whole lot. So pretty much anybody can do it. But you know what a lot of people haven't done? Hit that like and subscribe button. Do me a favor. Go down there and hit that subscribe button. And hang out with me at the wrenching lounge. Alright, it's been an hour, so it's time to torque the pan down. Remember, 33 foot-pounds. One down, 9 to go. And this is one of the last steps we're going to do. We've removed the drain plug, and all that's left is fill it up. When it starts running out of this, we're good. We're going to start with our friction modifier. We're going to go ahead and squeeze this stuff in. Love the smell of fresh gear oil. So This is always hard doing it on the garage floor. But these bags Valvoline uses are awesome. They definitely make this job a whole lot easier. You don't need a pump, nothing like that. All you're doing is just squeezing it in. Clean up on aisle 5. And there is a complete fill. Clean this up a little bit. Put our plug in. Little cleanup. Now what we got to do is torque it to 38 foot-pounds. And that's that. Oh, and don't forget to put your harness back on your bolts here. And that's it. So as you can see, it's not hard. It's just a little messy and a little time consuming. I was able to do it for a total of about $250. And I saved a whole lot more by doing it myself. So just take your time and you'll be all right. And whatever you do, avoid that catalytic converter. So thanks for hanging out here at the lounge. And until next time, keep turning wrenches and chasing dreams. See you next time.